This video is going to be about my Palmetto State Armory AR47 build with a carbine length gas system, some thoughts and observations about specific aspects of this build, and the initial 200 rounds that I put downrange. I'm also going to discuss the parts that I consider to be crucial to have a reliable 7.62x39 carbine and an AR platform. So for me, it feels like this build has been a long time coming. I feel like the technology has finally got to the point where it's possible to have a rifle like this run almost, if not as reliable as an AR-15. In previous years, these builds were plagued with problems such as unreliable magazines, light primer strikes, and not being able to fire certain brands of ammo. I feel like these concerns have been addressed to the point where the remaining concerns that I did have about this build could easily be remedied with a bit of foresight. So I know there's a few reasons why somebody would be interested in building an AR platform rifle in 7.62x39, and for me the first one is cost. I mean, shooting something that's roughly 20 cents a round, you're going to be able to replace worn or damaged parts and still save money compared to shooting brass through an AR-15 over thousands of rounds. Although I will take a second to say that I don't shoot steel-cased ammo through my AR-15s. I realize a lot of people do, and if you do, that's cool. I totally understand why. From the research that I've seen, I personally feel like there's more of a chance for stuck casings due to the shape of the 223-5.56 round. But the tapered shape of the 7.62x39 round is far more conducive to extraction. And also, while we're talking about steel case ammo, I think it's worth mentioning that steel case ammo is going to run dirtier than brass. Basically, it's just cheaper ammo. If you're aware of this and you clean your firearms, I don't see this being a huge issue. I will say that this particular build, I actually prefer to have the carbine length gas system, knowing that the action is a bit more violent and should run best under dirty conditions. So another reason for building something like this would be for hunting purposes. Some states do not allow for hunting with a 223-5.56 round, so this kind of rifle would be a great 30 caliber alternative. I also believe that when it comes to hunting with something like this, there is a magazine round restriction also. So if you do plan on building an AR-47 for hunting purposes, I would just suggest that you do your homework in your specific state. Besides those two reasons, for me, it just seemed like a natural progression to combine the two most common platforms that I've worked on and are familiar with into one. I already had the ammo, compatible lowers, spare parts, and things like that. I felt like I could get into this platform for a fairly low cost. I'm sure there's many more reasons why somebody might be into a 7.62x39 build like this. These three reasons just happen to be the ones that are at the top of my list. All that being said, if you already have an assembled lower that you can utilize, you can get into something like this for as low as 260 bucks. My upper came from Palmetto State Armory. It came with the bolt carrier group with the enhanced firing pin for $229.99 with free shipping. I also purchased a Wolf Extra Power hammer spring for $5, and you can get a magazine for these for right around 20 bucks. Now, if you don't have a lower sitting around or you decide to go with a dedicated lower, you can add on $30 for a basic Anderson lower, and roughly 50 bucks for a mil-spec lower parts kit. And then add to that any kind of paperwork fee your FFL might have. So basically, for 340 bucks plus paperwork fees, you can build one of these from the ground up and it'll be as reliable as an AR-15. So now I'm going to take some time to go over the things that I think are essential to make a build like this run 100%. The first one being an enhanced firing pin. One of the original problems with these builds were light primer strikes. This product totally eliminates this issue. There are instructional videos on how to shave down the ledge where the pin contacts the bolt to achieve this effect on a non-enhanced pin. In my opinion, you're better off just buying one for $10 instead of altering the interior parts of your rifle by removing material. or you can look for the enhanced firing pin to be included when you buy your upper or your bolt carrier group. The next thing is going to be the Extra Power Wolf hammer spring. This spring will solve the issue of not being able to use any brand of ammo on your build. From the research that I've done, it mostly addresses the use of Tula ammo, which sometimes they have their primers set deeper in. So for $5 you can completely eliminate that issue. I think that's a fairly good investment. One thing to say on that though is that my lower is a dedicated lower just for this build. If you're planning on switching your lowers back and forth, you might want to do some additional research on using an Extra Power hammer spring when it's not really needed. There might be some additional concerns there. And another thing worth noting is that when you install this spring, it will increase the pull of your trigger. So mine went from 3.5 pounds to over 7 pounds. The next thing I want to mention is the magazines. So in all the research that I did, the brand that overwhelmingly stood out was C Products Defense magazines. They have a coating on them that gives them an advantage in feeding. Seems like everyone is recommending the Generation 3 version. Although when I went to purchase mine, I realized that most of the websites were not identifying the generation of magazine. I mean, there were a couple that were, but most were not. I do have to say that when I bought mine, I bought two 10s, two 20s, and two 30s. The 20s and 30s worked fine, but I must have got an earlier generation on the 10s, because when I function test them by pushing rounds through with my thumb on the workbench, I noticed that the front edge of the shell casing was catching on the lip of the front of the magazine, and also the little lip that curled down over the top of the shell casing was actually scratching the shell casing. So ironically, I'd just done my research on the magazines, and I seen a gentleman have a video with this exact problem, and he actually shows you how to Dremel out part of the front of the mag to alleviate this problem. So I knew exactly what to do. I actually fixed both of those mags before I even headed out to the range for my function test. And after running all of my mags, I had absolutely zero issues. So the last thing I'd like to mention is the bolt. So the reason that I even mention the bolt is that I've come across some research that suggests that the 7.62 by 39 caliber bolt tends to start failing between 3,000 and 5,000 rounds. It's due to the thickness of the circular wall at the lugs, and also the lugs closest to the extractor will tend to shear off or break in some manner. And I also have heard a lot of talk about the extractor failing due to ejecting steel cases. Although most of the research that I've come across doesn't seem to confirm that, just because the steel case of the ammo is softer than the extractor. So this shouldn't be an issue, but I guess time will tell that. These bolt concerns could possibly change in the future as technology increases, but as of right now, which is late 2018, I would suggest that you invest in a spare bolt, which runs around $50 or so. Carry it in an oil-soaked rag inside of a plastic bag inside your grip just to have it as a backup. You don't really need a spare bolt for this build to run 100%. I thought it was worth mentioning just because I think the bolt is the weak link of a build like this. This issue is what I was referring to earlier when I mentioned the word foresight. What I did was I went online and searched for a bolt carrier group to fit the criteria that I thought was important, which included things like magnetic particle inspected, high pressure tested, nitride coated. I actually found a Toolcraft bolt carrier group that I liked on the Acme Machine Company website for $79.99. I'm actually running that as my primary, and I am using the Palmetto State Armory bolt carrier group as my backup. As far as my 200 round observations on this build, I have to say that I was pleasantly surprised. It ran flawlessly. It was actually more accurate than I anticipated it would be. I'll say it again, I feel like if you address the issues that plagued the AR47 builds in the past, you're going to have a rifle that performs and performs well. So I'll attempt to make update videos on this build in the future, most likely at specific round counts, just to let everybody know how it's holding up and how it's wearing. Alright, so the last thing I'm going to do is run down a parts list of this specific build for anybody that's interested. I know I mentioned earlier that someone could get into something like this for, you know, roughly 260 bucks if they had a lower sitting around that they could utilize. But you can see that that is not the path that I took. So you can see I have a lot of Magpul in this build. Up front I have a SL handguard with a 7-slot polymer M-lock rail that the angle 4 grip is attached to. The grip is a Magpul K2 Plus. Right behind that I have a Noveske QD end plate installed. Behind that I have a Magpul CTR stock with the extended rubber butt pad. On top of the rifle I have a Sightmark CSR Wolverine red dot with a kill flash. That's mounted on a 5-slot UTG QD mount. Behind that is the Magpul M-Bus rear backup sight. Below all that is a custom AR dust covers 7.62x39 ejection port cover that's marked inside and out. I actually considered that a safety issue just for the purposes of not having somebody try to jam the wrong caliber mag in my gun. Below that is a Power Customs oversized mag release. Right below that you can see I have a Magpul bad lever installed. I also have the Power Customs charging handle with the extended latch, and I also have an anti-rotational trigger hammer pin set installed on this build. All that is sitting on top of a basic Anderson lower with a Palmetto State Armory classic lower parts kit minus the ambi safety selector. The identification marker on the magazine, that's a magbands.com identification band. And the last thing that I'd like to mention is something on the interior of the rifle that I hadn't mentioned yet, and that is I have a Tubbs flat wire buffer spring installed on this build. If you're interested in learning about that, he has a few videos up that he really does an excellent job explaining exactly how they work. They're advertised to dampen the recoil and last as long as your rifle does. They run about 28 bucks plus shipping. In the end it turns out to be a little less than $36, but I definitely think it's a good investment. Alright, that's going to conclude my video on my AR47 build. I hope somebody out there got something from it. Feel free to leave your questions and comments, and be safe and God bless.